Hello, everyone. My name is Ismail Shahtakhtinski, and I'm the principal immigration attorney and founding member of IS Law Firm. At IS Law Firm, we help immigrants in different kinds of immigration applications and petitions. We help individuals and businesses in business immigration processes. And today's topic will be related to business immigration. We are a diverse team of individuals who work at IS Law Firm. Our staff speaks 9 different languages, and we help all kinds of businesses and individuals in immigration applications. If you would like to apply for any immigration benefit, you can contact our firm. All of the contact information is below. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's live stream. This is our bi-weekly live stream on different topics. Last week, we spoke about changes to citizenship application. This live stream is going to be focused on business immigration, any changes that took place in 2025, as well as opportunities for any immigrants to opening businesses and managing their businesses and their entrepreneurship in the United States. So we'll also cover, as I said, different types of business visas and investment-based visas in the United States. So as you all know, United States is a country of business opportunities, and the business creation, registration, and opening of businesses in the United States is very easy and streamlined. Of course, every state has its own rules, has its own laws related to businesses, but in general, opening and registering business in the United States is very simple compared to many other jurisdictions all over the world. Now, the first thing that is applicable to immigrants in the United States that I want to discuss is the distinction between owning a business in the United States and working for a business in the United States. So obviously, to work in the United States, you need a work permit. You need permission to work. You must be either a permanent resident or U.S. citizen or have a work permit to be able to work in the United States. But that does not mean that you need those to own a business in the United States. So, for example, a student on a student visa can open a business in the United States, own the business in the United States, and they will not be violating their student visa status in the U.S. Similarly, anyone on a visitor visa, any kind of status in the United States, you can own a business, you can register a business in the U.S., you can hire employees, you can do any ownership decisions for the business, guide the vision, build and expand your business, but you cannot perform day-to-day operations unless you have a work permit or permanent residency or citizenship in the United States. In fact, someone may be outside of the U.S. and they may never be in the United States, and they can technically own a business in the United States as long as they have a manager, they have an employee who manages day-to-day operations of the business. You can hire employees and workers in the United States, and that's what we do as a law firm. We help register business, we help to form business entities, we help to open bank account, obtain tax ID, draft agreements, and so on, and even with business purchase transactions. And then once business is formed, then our law firm can also help you to obtain immigration benefits, such as either sponsoring yourself as a business owner or sponsoring your employees. So let's first talk about different types of business entities in the United States. So many of you have heard, obviously, of corporations and limited liability company. So what's the difference between a corporation and limited liability company? In a legal sense, for a new business that gets registered in the United States, there is not much difference. Limited liability company as a business in terms of legal business, legal entity, is easier to manage. And this is what we usually typically recommend in terms of registering in the United States. Now, as the business grows, or depending on certain parameters, we may also recommend to register a C Corp, S Corp, depending on the type of the business and membership and the ownership and shareholders of the business. There are certain also limitations for S Corp, C Corp, but I'm not going to go into those details. You don't need to necessarily go into the details at this time. We're talking about generally business opportunities and entrepreneurship in the United States. So LLC registration in different states, it's a different process, but they're very similar. It can be done online. It's very quick, very simple. The government filing fee is very low. For example, in Virginia, it's only $100. Now, in some states, it's $600 or so on. But in many states, it's very low filing fee. And it's also a very simple process in terms of going through the registration process, drafting operating agreement, and so on. And many of these words, they are legal words, and they sound complicated, and a lot of people have this mental block, and we understand it. I get it. I'm as a lawyer, I've been practicing law for 19 years. Those things sound very simple to me, but someone who is dealing, let's say, with construction or restaurant business and so on, they don't want to deal with those paperwork stuff, and all this sounds complicated. But I want to assure you that it's not. It's not complicated. You can hire a professional, and they'll take care of it. You don't have to necessarily deal with all those licensing issues yourself, and you don't have to necessarily deal with it as much as many people think that they have to. The main important part in owning, creating, registering business, opening a business in the United States is to have your business vision and to have an idea. So you can easily do so by hiring a simple professional to do those simple business registration parts, while you're focusing on what you do the best, whatever type of business, whatever type of work you do. So other types of businesses are partnership, there is limited partnership, and so on. We're not going to go into those details because as a foreign citizen, if you're opening a business in the United States, those are not going to be options. Most likely, in rare circumstances, it would be. But LLC and corporation is probably something that you'll be registering. And again, if you contact us, we'll register it for you. It's going to be streamlined. You're not even going to notice how it's done and what gets done. And there is not much requirements from you. You can be sitting abroad in another country, and we can get it all registered and done for you. Again, the most important part is to have your business plan, not necessarily a complicated written business plan. It's good always to put everything in writing, but to have your vision, to have your ideas, and we can implement it here. In terms of conducting business in the United States, it's also as simple I wouldn't say it simple, but it's much simpler than in many other countries in the world. And it is, the government is accommodating. Every state's government wants you to register businesses. Some certain size of the businesses, they can even give you some kind of tax breaks, whether it's sales tax, property tax, and local taxes that you can register. You can get loans in the United States if you register a business, although that process is going to be a little bit difficult if you're not a permanent resident or citizen of the United States. Now, the other part, what you can do is if you have a friend, a relative, or a partner in the United States, always a good idea to have someone who is joining you, who is in the US, and they have citizenship or permanent residency, no matter what percentage of ownership they have. But if you have them on board with you, it makes it easier in terms of paperwork, in terms of opening a bank account, and so on. And we can certainly help you with all those things. But let's talk about the immigration options. So someone from abroad wants to open a business in the United States. What kind of immigration options they have for themselves and for the employees they want to bring here to the United States with them. And there are different types of options. The first option that I want to talk about is investor visa. It's not a permanent residency through investment, it's a visa through investment. And that's E2 investor visa. And the E2 investor visa is based on the international treaty, bilateral treaty between the United States and the country of your citizenship. Now, the US doesn't have that treaty with all of the countries in the world, but most of the states in the world have that treaty with the United States. Probably most of the states. I would say yes, actually, most of the states have that treaty with the United States. And what that treaty says is that if a citizen of that country comes and opens a business in the United States, and the law says invest substantial amount to that business, and we'll talk about what substantial means, and wants to come to the United States to manage that business, they can easily qualify for E2 investor visa. Now there are smaller requirements, not smaller, meaning there are other requirements in the process, such as you have to demonstrate the lawful source of funds in terms of whose investment, who must be the investor. Investor must be you if you're sponsoring yourself. But as to where you get the money, it has to be lawful source. But you can loan the money. You can loan the money from a friend, or you can get it as a gift from a family member, from a friend, or you can loan it from a bank, with the only condition that the assets of the business that you're creating in the United States cannot be a collateral for that loan, meaning the business itself cannot serve as collateral for the loan that you're taking to invest in the United States. Now, the source of the funds that you will invest do not even have to be outside of the US. Many people misunderstand that for E2 investor visa, you have to necessarily transfer the money from outside of the United States. No, I mean, if you have a friend, if you have a relative, if you have someone who's loaning the money and they live in the United States, and they have ways of showing how they obtained those funds that they transferred to you, whether they loaned it to you or gifted to you, that will be enough. The source doesn't have to be from abroad. Now, let's talk about the amount of the investment for the E2 investor visa. The amount of the investment is gray because the law says substantial investment. Typically, substantial investment has been interpreted anywhere close to $100,000 and obviously over $100,000. But there are, different meanings of substantiality. So the substantial investment, in a smaller business, we usually say somewhere around 75, 85,000. That's typically enough to qualify. And what it means is that you invest the funds into your business, right? The first step in the E2 business, E2 visa, let's say if you want to qualify for it, is to have a business idea, a business plan, even if it's in your mind only. You don't have to necessarily have it on the paper yet. Then we would register a business for you in the United States, in the state that you choose, whether it's LLC or corporation and so on. And then we will you will start building that business. You will invest the funds and you have to spend those funds. So you have to spend around 75, 85,000 for the purposes of your business. That includes everything related to your business. Let's say if you want to build a construction business in the US, you want to open a construction business in the US, and you buy a truck for your business, you buy equipment, you hire an employee, you lease a warehouse, and so on and so forth. As long as that builds up to 85,000, 75,000, I would say you're right to apply for E2 visa. Now, you open a pizzeria, you open a restaurant, and so on. Whatever type of business, you open a salon, marketing business, IT business, all of those businesses qualify for E2 investor visa. And it's a very beneficial type of visa because E2 investor visa doesn't have any limit in terms of how many times you can renew it. You have to renew it every 2 years by demonstrating that the business still continues. It doesn't necessarily require your business to succeed, even to make money. I mean, business may be losing money. I mean, a lot of businesses, they start and they have negative profit and so on. As long as you're still trying to build that business, as long as that business's heart beats, you can renew your E2 status in the US. Your family members get E2 visa as well. Your spouse can qualify for work permit, apply, meaning they already qualify, but they also qualify by just nature. They don't even have to apply for the work permit. So as long as they have the E2 investors visa with which they enter the United States, then they qualify to be employed in the United States. Your children would qualify as residents for the purposes of public schools if you have E2 investor visa. Now, a lot of people ask, Does the E2 investor visa automatically lead to permanent residency? The answer is that there is almost no type of visa that or status in the US that automatically leads to permanent residency, right? So you may have heard H-1B leads to permanent residency. That's not true. H-1B is just a work visa, but at the same time, if the employer sponsors the employee for a process known as perm, then they can get green card. But those two things do not depend on each other. The only types of statuses or visas that can lead to permanent residency automatically are either asylum or U visa. There may be some couple rare types of visas that I cannot remember now. So E2 status allows you to stay, manage your business, develop your business in the US. The beauty of E2 visa, E2 status as an investor for you is that you can also bring employees from your home country into the US, as long as they are either specialized employees that have special knowledge of the type of the business that you own and you manage, or they are coming to manage for managerial duties. So if those employees have managerial responsibilities, then you can bring those employees from your home country into the United States, and they will have the E2 visa as well. You can sponsor them, and it's a fairly quick process. So that's one of the good options for any immigrant businesses in the US, or any immigrants who want to establish their business, register their business in the US, and be able to work, bring their family and bring their employees and develop their business in the US. E2 is one of the options. The other option for investors, foreign investors in the US, or entrepreneurs or business owners, is L1 visa. L1 visa allows multinational businesses. Don't be scared by the word. It doesn't have to be a huge business. It means there is a foreign business and they want to open a branch office or affiliate, as long as the ownership of the two businesses 50% same or more, that will qualify. And the employee, either investor himself or herself, or any employee, is either managerial or has specialized knowledge of the type of the business, and they get transferred into the US to their new affiliate or branch office. Now, in practice, these are all terminologies that I used for this, but in practice, let's just simplify it. So let's say there is a marketing business that employs 20 employees, and it's somewhere abroad in Germany, right? And then this company now wants to register a business in the US, or the owner of that marketing business wants to register a business in the US. And they do. Now they want to bring their chief financial officer, or they want to bring their accounting manager into the United States, or their operations manager into the US, so that they can develop the business here. That will qualify for L1, as long as L1 visa, as long as that employee has worked for at least 1 year for the foreign entity within the last 3 years. So one of the last 3 years. I know it all sounds complicated. These are the requirements, but if you look at it closer, it's not as complicated. So as long as the employee, the beneficiary, worked for 1 year of the last 3 years for the foreign entity, and they come to the United States, that's called L1 intracompany transferees. So that's one option. The same L1A, which is if it's a managerial position or executive position, they can also file for permanent residency. Again, it doesn't automatically lead to permanent residency, but L1 is faster. L1A, that can be processed, and they can come to the US, or you as an investor can come to the US. If you have a business abroad and you're opening business here, then you can come to the US with L1A, and then you can also file for permanent residency on the same basis, but you would need more proof, more documentation for this. But what I'm talking about is the first steps of the process. So it's either E2 investor visa if you don't have a business there that you're managing in your country or any other foreign country, or if you don't want to deal with that part, E2 investor visa is simpler. In fact, E2 is simpler than L1, and a lot of times when our clients, foreign businesses, they want to bring the investor, either owner or the employees, into the US, we first recommend doing E2 because that's easier and more secure and quicker process because it doesn't require filing of a petition here in the US. It gets directly sent to the consulate. Now, if the beneficiary is already in the US, if you, as an immigrant, for example, you're already in the US, you are on student status and you want to register a business and then qualify for E2 investor visa, you can do the change of status here. In that case, you can file a petition in the US. You don't have to go through US consulate abroad. But if you're abroad and you go through US consulate, then the petition package and all of the proof and documentation and memo, all of that gets filed directly with the consulate. So it's kind of faster, quicker process. It's also easier process because all you need to show as a small business here in the US, you don't have to show the existence of a foreign entity which transfers. You don't have to show the 1 year out of the last 3 years as you do for L1. But even if you qualify, as I said, E2 may be a ramp that you can use to come to the US. And then down the road, consider possibly L1A or even directly to permanent residency as a multinational executive or manager. So those are the types of visas that usually apply. Now, for entrepreneurs, startups, small businesses in the US. Now, there is, many of you probably heard of a investment-based permanent residency, investment-based green card that used to be called $1 million green card, right? So that's the formal name of it is employment-based 5. Many know it as EB5. So the EB5 green card process, it still exists. It's been modified. It's no longer 1 million because of all the litigation and disputes after Trump's first administration when they tried to change it from 1 million to 1.8 million, and then some of it got reversed and so on. But somehow it got from 1 million to 1,080,000. So right now it's weird number, but it's 1,080,000. So you have to invest in the US business, whether you can create a new business or whether it's a new business you created, or whether you invest into existing business where you at least acquire 50% or more, or in there are also, or in certain circumstances, you can also invest into an existing larger business that's called regional center that can pool immigrants from all over the world and they can utilize it to get their green card. So it's $1,080,000 investment. And you also have to create the investment, that your investment must help create 10 jobs. At least that must be the plan. Basically, that must be used to buy equipment, lease place, or buy real estate, for the business, not for yourself, not house. I often get asked, can I buy a car for myself, or can I buy a house and rent it out and qualify either for E2 or EB5? No, the answer is no. It cannot qualify because that's not a real business. That's not an at-risk business. So the business must be at risk. It has to be a real business which will hire employees and so on. So a lot of people want to invest in real estate because that's a secure type of business, secure type of investment. And you can do so, but as long as it will create jobs and it has the potential to grow into active large business creating jobs and so on. And that type of real estate can be, for example, a hotel business, right? So you can buy real estate, turn it into a hotel. In the hotel you have workers, you have bellmen, you have receptionists, you have cleaners and so on. So you create jobs through this process. Or you can, if you're talking about apartments, then let's say you buy a bunch of apartments or apartment complex, and you create a management company that's going to be managing. So you have full-time staff, you have people, engineers, accountant, and so on, managing this complex. So that's possible. Or even different types of businesses, such as you want to open a restaurant, you want to invest in buying the real estate for that restaurant, right? The actual location of it, whether it's you're going to build something or so on. You can do so, but you cannot spend the entire amount of investment on real estate, because again, then the part. So let's say you want to invest 100,000 to get an E2 visa, and you want to buy a land, and you're going to put a little booth there. That's not going to be a realistic business. So it has to be a real active business and it should make sense. And that's what they verify. Is it that you're just trying to transfer your money to the US and get E2 visa, or is it that you really want to create a business and manage business in the United States? So those are different types of investments and different types of visa categories. Now, regarding investment-based EB5, well, employment-based EB5, which is investment-based permanent residency, I also want to say that there is a certain type which requires 800,000 investment instead of 1,080,000, and that is if your business is located in what's called the target area. So if you open a business in the target area, and I'll explain what target area is, then you can invest 800,000 rather than 1,080,000, and you still need to create 10 jobs to qualify for this. But 800,000 investment for the permanent residency will require investment in a target area, which means it's either an area designated by the state. Each state designates target area. That is usually an area where the unemployment rate is 1.5 times higher than the federal unemployment rate, or it's a rural area outside of a metropolitan area of any city, and it has less than of a major city, and it has less than 20,000 population. So those are called target areas. If you invest there, then the amount of the investment used to be 500,000, but again, that changed after all these changes, as we call roller coasters during the Trump administration. So the other types of immigration options based on business and entrepreneurship in the US, I would mention one of them would be national interest waiver. So national interest waiver is also what's called employment-based. It's employment-based category 2. It has a priority date. I'm not going to explain. It's a very long and lengthy subject, but there is some wait time. Currently, it's approximately 2 years of wait time if you qualify for that. But national interest waiver basically says that you're coming to the U.S. to work, whether for your business or not, and you have exceptional abilities. You are a very successful business person. You've succeeded in creating these types of businesses in the past, and you're creating a business in the US. You will substantially benefit the US economy. You will have employees and so on. There will be substantial tax benefits to the US. And that is in the US national interest. So that way you can obtain permanent residency, green card in the US through that process. Now, when you say that you will, it's one thing to promise that you will by demonstrating your past achievements, and it's another thing to show that you already have done it. So in terms of national interest waiver, doing it from abroad, unless you already have such a documented history of achievements, and you have already taken steps in the US to bring a business to the US or create business in the US, it's really hard to prove, to demonstrate, unless you've already done. So, for example, let's make a practical example. So, you have a business. Let's say you have a construction business abroad, and you've been very successful. You have a bunch of employees. You have locations. You have successful projects and so on. Now you register a business entity in the US, and you want to start a construction business here in the US. You invest about 100,000 or so, create, rent an office or buy an office, whatever. You hire employees, you start your project here, and you can apply for E2 and L1 immediately, right? So you don't have to wait for 2 years for the national interest waiver. And then you develop that project to the level that you already have the US workers. And by demonstrating the plans going forward, you can qualify for national interest waiver, where you would need to file a petition with a memorandum and all the documents, letters, demonstrating your past documented history of success and achievements, and what you will do prospectively for the US if you're allowed to remain here permanently and continue growing and expanding and impacting the U.S. national interest. So that's national interest waiver. The other type of immigration into the U.S. through business, although it's more kind of a little bit, it's kind of in the border of it. I would mention is extraordinary ability, employment-based category one. If you have extraordinary talents, if you are very well known, you're on top of your field, that usually applies to all kinds of fields. It could be a scientist, it could be a sports person, it could be anyone, right? So you could be a great marketing person, you could be a great scientist, and so on. And if you are a great business person, if you're a great entrepreneur and you've achieved such high results, you have such high achievements that you have articles written about you, you have something patented, and so on. You're such a great business executive, that you can qualify. Then in that case, you can qualify for the EB1, extraordinary ability based permanent residency in the US. So in general, these are the types of business immigration visas and permanent residency through business that small business owners can sponsor themselves or sponsor their employees, or major businesses can sponsor their employees. Again, we're going to go back and let's count what we talked about. Is E2 investor visa, L1 intracompany transferee, national interest waiver, EB5 investor visa, green card, and extraordinary ability. Now, there is also extraordinary ability O1. That also can be done for your own business, through your own business, but that's a visa, not the permanent residency. It's very similar to the extraordinary ability permanent residency. Now, many of you have heard of golden visa that Trump has announced with his picture on it. The golden visa is not really active, and I don't think it can be unless the Congress accepts it and unless the Congress enacts it. It's not going to be operational. It's more of just a noise. It's not a reality, because the president, the executive branch, cannot create new types of immigration into the United States. It has to be done by the U.S. Congress. It has to be enacted as a law. Right now, what is active is the Immigration and Naturalization Act, that everybody talks about the need for the reform because it's been enacted many decades ago. But again, the president single-handedly cannot create a new way of immigrating in the U.S. Now, that is meaning new way of becoming a permanent resident or getting a visa or visa status in the U.S. But what the president can do is create a parole. Now, you've heard under the Biden administration, they created entrepreneur parole program. That program has limited use because of the amount of investment required and certain requirements. And to be honest with you, maybe some of my colleagues had clients, some of the clients, with startups that used that, but I've never had a need for it, because all of my clients who startups who come to the US and want to register a business, we do it even before they come to the US. So we get contacted from someone abroad who wants to start a business here. We register, put it all together, all the packages ready for them. When they come in, they can open a bank account for themselves and for their business. In certain circumstances, we can open even a bank account for their business while they're over there. And then once they come in here, now they have the business entity, they have everything. We can even help them appointing manager and so on. And then down the road, they would usually qualify for L1, either for E2, either for national interest waiver, EB, so that entrepreneur parole is not something that we had come across where somebody needed this. And it also is not a status. It can be terminated at any time. And as we know, it's a parole program, basically. It's similar to parole for Afghanis and Ukrainians and so on. And the president, just as one president can create it, the other one can terminate it or stop it at any time. So that's why I personally wouldn't recommend. In terms of work visa H-1B, that's also very much in the news now because of the filing fees that Trump administration increased to $100,000. It used to be approximately 2,700. So we're talking about close to 3,000. It now changed to 100,000. The H-1B has its own challenges for businesses that where the entrepreneurs, business owners would like to sponsor themselves. It has significant limitations because H-1B requires employer-employee relationship, and if you own your own business, you cannot be employer and employee for the same business. You can, but not for the H-1B purposes, because you have to have the control of firing the employee, and you have to have that employee-employer relationship. But there is a conflict of interest if you're both the employer and employee. Similarly, the employment-based permanent residency, what is known as labor certification, it's also known as PERM process, PERM, just permanent labor certification process. That has its own conflict issues as well for business owners sponsoring themselves. They cannot do so because it requires the business to conduct recruitment, advertisement, and demonstrate that they couldn't find anyone with the minimum qualifications to sponsor the beneficiary. But if the person conducting the recruitment is the owner of the business and the employee for whom they're conducting the recruitment is also the owner of the business, that's where the conflict is, because obviously that business owner is interested, and that business on behalf of their business owner is interested to do shady things to demonstrate that they couldn't find an employee minimally qualified for that job. So perm labor certification is not completely out of the question. There are certain limitations, limited circumstances where it can be used and applied, but I'm not going to talk about it because that's going to be a very lengthy conversation. So what I wanted to ask you, all our audience members, if you have any questions, you can post here in chat section, and I will answer all the questions. I have some of the questions posted on our social media that I will try to answer as much as I can. And if anyone listening to this live stream after the live stream is over, you can put your question in the comment, and we will do our best. Myself or my colleagues will do our best to answer your questions in the comment section. So feel free to post any questions, not necessarily related to business investment, any immigration questions, and I will be happy to answer. So what I wanted to say at the closing about the different types of visas and green cards. Again, the United States remains the top, even now, remains the top destination for startups and new businesses from all over the world. It's easy. It's not easy to do it yourself, to learn it yourself, but we make it easy. And as I said, we are an immigration law firm and business law firm. We have been in practice for 19 years. I'm the founding member of this firm. We have very diverse team. We have lawyers and paralegals and assistants who speak 9 different languages, not each one of us, linguists, but polyglots. But together we speak 9, I think maybe even 10. I don't know. I'm not sure. I lost the count. So different languages of whatever country you're from or someone get them in touch with us. We'll be happy to help, to consult. We do Zoom consultations. We do consultations over the phone, WhatsApp, all kinds of mediums. And we, ask questions, provide information, and determine the best option and the most suitable option. I always say a lot of times clients contact me and they say, I want to apply for different, whatever is available immigration option. What is the best option? I want to move to the United States. My first question to them is that, what are you going to do? If you come to the US, what's your plan? What are you going to do? Let's say, imagine you have a permanent residency already. What is your plan? And somebody says, well, I want to, find a job. I say, well, let's start from that. What are you good at? what kind of job you're going to be looking for. Maybe let's find an employer who's willing to sponsor you. Or somebody says, I'm going to start a business. I have this good, knowledge of this and that. I say, well, let's look at the business. Let's create a business for you. Let's register business, open it, and let's look and see what type of business immigration option would you can qualify for, would it fit your circumstances, whether it's E2, whether it's green card for permanent residency, whether it's national interest waiver, L1, and so on. So what we do, that's the nature of consultation. We go through all this process, explain, and so on. So if you know anyone who is abroad or here in the US in any type of status and they're considering creating their own business entity, please refer them to us, send them this video, link to this video, share this link, and have them contact us. All the contact information is going to be below this video post. And again, thank you everyone for liking this video, for subscribing to our channel. We have, as I said, bi-weekly live stream where I usually discuss different topics like today's topic, and we will have next bi-weekly live stream 2 weeks from now on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern time, which is also known as worldwide New York time. So 7 p.m. New York time every 2 weeks. All right, I'll move on to the questions, and I see some posted questions in the chat section, and I see some posted questions from the social media. All right, so the first question is, I am currently live in the United States and have TPS. Let me move it here so I look in the direction of camera as I read these questions. Okay, I currently live in the United States and I have TPS. If I apply for E2 visa, I have to leave the country to receive the visa. Depends. That depends on your previous status before the TPS. So it's really complicated because, depends on what type of visa status you entered with. TPS is called temporary protected status. It is a status. But depending on what you had, whether you had any gap in status, how you entered the United States, because TPS can be granted to anyone based on the country that you are a citizen of. Even if you entered the United States as undocumented without inspection, or even if you had a deportation order, you can still qualify for TPS if the country is announced. So my recommendation is consult with a lawyer, because that's very complicated matter as to whether you can change from TPS to E2, for example. Next question is, how hard is it to get an E2 visa now under the Trump administration? Are there major delays, and do applicants risk losing their investment if the visa is denied? Very good question, and I'm going to talk about losing or possibly protecting your investment for a case if your visa gets denied. And that's one of the most frequently asked questions in terms of how can I, risk investing 100,000 and then my visa gets denied at the consulate. What do I do? So number one, how hard is it to get E2 visa now in the Trump administration? Well, the laws and the regulations and the policies and the rules remain the same. In terms of how hard it is, there has not been a significant change, but there's been change in terms of delays at the consulates. Now, each consulate has its own officers and has its own, individuals. And the most of these applications, petitions, get reviewed by individual officers. So, and that officer is a human being. They have their own likes, dislikes, their own moods, their own sympathies, their own preferences, and many different human factors affect the decisions. So, under Trump administration, what has changed is that some of the officers, and that applies to everything across, not just E2 or consular officers, but even asylum officers here in the U.S. or officers at the USCIS, handling different types of petitions here in the U.S. Some of the officers who had that predisposition of, denying visas or not being happy or not being sympathetic to immigration, they may take the advantage of the current situation and deny more cases than they used to before, because knowing that now that there are limited ways, or the appeals courts and so on, or State Department is not going to reverse their decision or punish them for their denial. So they can apply their discretion negatively, but also good news is that many officers actually apply their discretion positively. Some of them, especially those cases where I sit across the table and I talk to the officers in those types of cases, and those are usually humanitarian cases, asylum cases, and so on, or immigration courts. Sometimes I can actually tell that those officers are trying to actually do whatever they can to grant the benefit, because they're trying to seemingly like to compensate for what is going on with immigration and all the fear that people have in terms of the U.S. immigration and what Trump administration does and so on. I'm not saying they're approving cases left and right, but if they could lean one way or another, they lean one way or another. So all in all, I wouldn't say there's been significant change in terms of E2 visa approvals, but in terms of delays, yes, unfortunately there have been delays, because the consulates are less effective than they used to be, and unfortunately, even just last year, they were more effective than now. And I'm not saying it from political point of view, right? So I have, in terms of this, I try to keep politics away when I render my opinions about these things, but I observe it because we work on this. I work with these matters every day, whether it's with the Department of Justice, Department of Labor, Department of State, U.S. consulates, and so on. And the level of disorder and delays and chaos that we are seeing now, unfortunately, I haven't seen before. And the first reflection, the first result of that chaos and disorder and so on and mismanagement is the delay. Every case gets delayed, and the delays are significant, and there is a lot of mishandling. So with that being said, E2 visas are similarly, all of the consular visas suffer. But once in a while, we see reverse. Once in a while, randomly, that's part of the chaos, right? The chaos doesn't necessarily mean one direction. It means chaotically up and down. So sometimes we see something that gets filed today and gets approved within a couple of months, where it used to be 6 months or 1 year. So in terms of the delay, how you can protect your investment, that's, literally $100,000 question, right? So you spend $100,000 in the US, you created the business, you spent it for whatever equipment leased and put someone to manage it until you arrive in the US on E2 visa status. And then you go to the consulate and bam, consulate denied. What can you do to protect yourself? So the options are limited, but it's doable. So number one, always consider that what you're investing, you're not just investing 100,000 on E2 visa. You're investing 100,000 into the business, right? So you're buying equipment and so on. So theoretically, you can sell those, but obviously a lot of it is going to lose price, right? So you buy something and sell next day, you're going to lose value of it after you open the package. So that's not, it still gives you hope that it's not going to go away. Second, if you have a partner with whom you're doing this in the US, right? You have a friend or relative and so on, maybe they'll be able to manage this. In the meantime, you can always reapply for E2. The other part, what you can do that is more secure, is go through what is called escrow process. Escrow process means what you do is you find the place for your business, you find the seller of the equipment, you do register LLC and so on. That's not a major part of the 100,000 investment. But you find, let's say you're opening a trucking business right here in the US. You find, trucking company or someone who is selling trucks. I don't know why my camera is bouncing back and forth. Okay, shouldn't bounce now. So, it's zooming in and out. I guess that's what I wanted to say. So you find a trucking, you want to open a trucking business. Or if you want to buy, you can invest for E2 purposes. You can also invest in existing business. You can buy a business, right? So you found the business and you have the plan of expanding it and you have the seller, everything is good. What you have is that you have planned that you're going to buy a trucking business with 3 trucks, and they have drivers, and you have one dispatcher or marketing person or whatever, office manager, whatever you want to call that person, and you are planning to buy additional 2 trucks down the road and so on, expand the business. What you do is you sign the contracts, and all of that is conditional upon your E2 being approved. And the funds, the 100,000 or 200,000, with 3 trucks and so on, probably it's going to be more than 100,000. You put that money in escrow, right? Whether it's with your attorney, like we can do it, we can be the one who holds that for your benefit or for the benefit of that seller of the trucking business or of the trucks. And when you go to the consulate, to the embassy for your interview, if your visa is approved, as an escrower, I think that's what it's called. Escrower is the one who holds. So as an escrower, I'm obligated to release it to that seller of the business, and that's it. You don't have any control to get the money back. So that's why the consulate is going to be motivated to approve your E2 so that the transaction goes through and there is benefit to the US, not only in future, but also now and everything. And you're protected. If the visa is not approved, then everything is off. The transaction is off. And now I, as escrower, have to give the money back to you. That is doable. That's possible. It costs a little more because of all these contracts, escrow contracts, and also, in major transactions, a lot of banks serve that, right? So they serve the role of the escrower, where the money gets invested, put into the bank, and there are contracts in place, and everybody's waiting for that button to be pressed when your E2 is approved or EB5 is approved, and the money gets sent to the sellers, to the vendors, and so on. And then, you come here to manage your business here in the US. So those are the ways you can protect. And if you get denied also for E2, you can also contact the the congressional representatives in the state where you invested, the city mayor. You can contact the chamber of commerce, and so on, and get letters of support, letter of verification from them. Get some kind of push against that officer at the consulate who may have not been in a good mood or picked on something that they shouldn't be picking on in denying your visa. So that's nothing is lost. So if you get denied, you can always reapply and better reorganize and so on. All right, next question I have is, thank you for the session. I had a quick question. Can the business visa be applied while we have the family reunion process? Yes, I assume what you mean by family reunion process is if you have a family reunion with a U.S. citizen immediate family member, such as your U.S. citizen spouse or child over 21, then you don't need a business visa. But if that is a family reunion, such as your parents sponsoring you and you're adult over 21, there is a long wait time. If you're unmarried, that's about 8 years of wait time. If you're married, that's going to be probably 14 years. Or sibling sponsoring sibling, that is going to take probably 16 years of wait time. So I guess your question is, during that type of case, can you apply for an investor visa? Now, it depends on the type of visa. So there are certain types of visas that are completely excluded from dual intent. So dual intent visas are, not excluded from non-immigrant intent. So exceptions to non-immigrant intent. For example, if you apply for a visitor visa or for a student visa, you have to demonstrate to the U.S. consulate that you're coming to the U.S. temporarily, that you're not planning to stay here in the U.S., right? So the dual intent visas are, for example, H-1Bs and L-1s that I mentioned. That's where you can affirmatively basically state at the consulate that I'm going to the U.S. and I'm planning to stay in the U.S. and I even have a petition filed by my brother or mother or father, and I'm going to move to the U.S. and the consulate cannot, by law, deny your L1 or H1 based on this. Those are dual intent. Now, L1 is one of those business visas that we discussed. Now, E2 is semi-dual intent, E2 investor visa. What it means is that, for example, if you're applying for a visitor visa or a student visa or J1, F1, you have to demonstrate that you're coming to the US temporarily by demonstrating that you have no intent of living in the US, but also by demonstrating that you have close ties to your home country where you will return. So you have to demonstrate that you maintain residence, you maintain, whatever personal affairs you have, your job, and so on. But different from that, E2 doesn't require. It still requires you not to have a permanent intent, but you don't have to demonstrate that, and you don't have to affirmatively demonstrate that you don't have non-immigrant intent, you don't have immigrant intent, but also you don't have to demonstrate at all that you keep close ties to your home country. In fact, when you apply for E2 visa, you can sell your house, you can quit your job, you can do. I'm not recommending to do that because you don't know if your visa is going to be approved, but technically you can, and that's not a problem as long as you just affirmatively state as answer to the question that you are planning to return to leave the US, and I don't care where you live. I mean, you're planning to leave the US if your business closes, if your business fails. Now, if you have a petition for family reunification, whether you can apply for E2, that will depend on the individual officer and how much they will believe that you will leave the US, even though you have a petition pending. If you have, again, a priority category petition pending that takes years, usually, as I said, it's 8 years to 16 years, depending on the category, it's easier to prove that you don't have immediate immigrant intent. My brother filed a petition for me that's pending. Maybe it's 16 years down the road. When it gets there, I'll think about it. That's one of the potential answers one can give, that as long as it's true, but I'm not intending today to go and permanently live in the US. They filed a petition. One day I'll consider when it gets there, even if it gets there in 16 years. So that's generally the answer as to whether you can qualify for a business visa while you have a family reunification process pending. Okay, next is Karim Mohamed says salam, salam, hello. Next question is, I'm considering investing either in a service business or in decorative products manufacturing business. The service business has been operating as an LLC for 2 years and I manage it myself. Okay, very good. Manufacturing business has been running for 10 months. If necessary, it would be easier to hire 2-3 employees for the decor business. From your point of view, which would be more? I think where you think that you're going to have, it says you're saying that if necessary, it would be easier to hire more for the decor business. So the decor business seems like it's going to be more active. You think that you can hire 2-3 employees in the immediate future, then I would say decor business. And, just by nature of it also, it seems like it would involve more activities and more. I mean, well, let me tell you this way, actually. Now, that's the legal answer that I gave you, but the friendly answer is that consider both businesses and see which one you're good at, which one you want to practice, which of these businesses you feel like you want to grow and develop. I am glad that you have 2 types of businesses, and I admire this, but it's really hard to be focused and manage both of them at the same time and pay equal attention to both. So that's what I would start with, is where you want to focus and choose one of them that you want to focus the most. Okay. Next, favorable or obtaining visa. Yeah, so that was end of the question. I didn't read. Next, LLC appliance repair technician. I make decor, which easy hiring employees. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's easy hiring employees, but again, both of them you can obtain visa through, but try to choose first on what you think will succeed, what you think you want to focus on the most, and then because both of them can qualify. All right. Next is, yes, the family reunion. I mean the invitation from parents. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I see the questions on the chat are over. I'll read some of the questions from the, in the meantime, if anyone has any questions that you want to post in the chat section, I will answer as much as I can. Can I start business in the US if I'm here on a tourist visa? Yes, the simple answer is yes. You can start a business even if you're not in the US, or even if you're here undocumented. Anyone can start and own business in the US. And you can start a business, you can own a business. Whether you can work for the business, that's the question. And for working for your own business, you still need visa, and those are the visas that we discussed. Otherwise, you can own a business even from being abroad. You can buy a US business, you can buy a property in the United States, even without coming to the United States. All of that is possible. What if I'm undocumented? Can I still own a business? Yes. So you can, as I said, you can own a business. How much investment is enough for E2? Roughly about 85,000 or more, we usually say. Anywhere above 100,000, the more the better it is, but 85,000. The lowest amount of the investment made where I obtained E2 visa for someone was 65,000. It was a small pizzeria. The client of mine spent 40,000 to buy the pizza store, and he spent about 25,000 to expand it. And he hired employee, bought some inventory, spent some money on marketing, and it was only 65,000 that they invested into the business. And we got them E2 investor visa. Strangely, there was no question about the amount of the investment. But I explained that it may be denied, but they wanted to give it a try, and it worked out. Hey, I'll take it. Can I switch from F1 or H1B to business visa? Yes, you can. You can switch from any type of visa status in the US to any other visa type of status in the US as long as you qualify. There are limited exceptions, such as J1 with 2-year foreign residency requirement, or D and crew visas. They have limitations or what they can change the status to, or whether they can change status in the US. But most of the time, all of these visas, we're talking about the common types of visas: visitor visa, H1, F1, all business type visas, and so on. You can switch between those visas, and you can switch to permanent residency to them. And technically, you can switch from permanent residency to any of those visas if you abandon your permanent residency in the US. So all of that can be done. All right. Can I buy existing US business to qualify for a visa? Yes, you can buy an existing business. You can invest into existing business. You can become a partner with someone who owns an existing business. The key is not all of your investment can be spent just for the purchase of the business. So the purpose of the E2 is to benefit the US economy, right? So you have to have these plans to create jobs and expand and so on. If you buy an existing business and you're going to sit on that existing business and that's it, what is the benefit to the US economy? Where is the expansion? So, if you just do that, basically someone owns, let's say John owns a business that is worth 100,000. Now you, the investor, you are paying John, so the money goes from your pocket to that 100,000. Money goes to that person's pocket, and the business remains the same. There is not much benefit. So you have to at least show some kind of development and expansion of the business. You can do so by promising, by giving business plan and so on, providing, but the best way to do it is actually do some of it. So that's a lot more convincing to the reviewing officer. So the reviewing officer will have less discretion saying, well, how do I know you're actually going to hire more employees and buy more equipment, more inventory, or lease additional location space, or open a new location, versus they have limited discretion when you already done it, right? So you bought one location of the business, you spent 100,000, and then you spent another 50,000. You opened another location, or hired employees, added employees, expanded the business one way or another, whether it's geographically, physically, or internally in terms of number of employees or inventory and so on. So you can invest in existing business, but the key is to make sure that you do it smartly, so you protect your interest, you protect your investment, and you do it in a way that would most likely qualify you for the investment-based visa. What kind of business works best for E2 or national interest waiver? Now, those are two different things, national interest waiver and E2, and they're somewhat very different. But any kind of business can qualify as long as it is a realistic, it is active, at-risk business. It's not a passive business. So anything that you do, you open, as long as it has potential to grow, create jobs and so on, that can qualify for E2 or national interest waiver. Now, in the case of national interest waiver, again, it's not the business that qualifies. National interest waiver is focused on you as an individual, your qualifications, your position, your skills and abilities, where E2 is focused on the business that you created. So those are two different things. But in terms of E2, my first advice is always, what type of business you should choose. Choose what you think you are good at. So if you are good in music, open a music, I was going to say music store, but yeah, that can be too. And we can open a music school, right? If you're good and beauty products or beauty services, open a salon. If you are good in marketing, open a marketing business. If you're good in you love cars, open a car sales or car service company. So that's the first thing to consider, is because you're not doing it just for E2 purposes, right? You wouldn't throw $100,000 just to get an E2, and then 2 years down the road you have to renew it. So think of it that way as well. And you have to renew it by demonstrating that the business continues. It's not as burdensome, as difficult as getting it first time, but you still have to show that the heart of your business still beats and it still continues. So don't just choose the business that you have no idea about how to manage, or profession that you are not familiar with. You may do very well, but it's very difficult to start something you've never done before. Um, you know, Consider all kinds, but in terms of E2, you can any kind of business, as long as it's active business, at-risk business, it can qualify. Is an online or consulting business acceptable for investment visas? Yes, it is acceptable. Now, what you have to justify why you have to be in the United States. So if you open an online business and all you do is you are advertising online, you're providing services online, there is no reason or purpose for you to be in the United States. You can be somewhere in Caribbean islands and manage this business. It may have nothing to do with the United States physically. That could be the challenge in the online business. But if you can justify why you have to be in the US, because you meet with the customers, yes, it's online, but you have a data center here, or you need to have some kind of office where employees will work and so on, then you can justify. So it's case by case, but it becomes harder with the online business. But we've gotten E2 approvals for many online businesses, or consulting businesses. Of course, consulting businesses can qualify. You don't necessarily have to sell products. You can sell services, or you can sell, consulting and ideas. Whatever you do, again, as long as it's a business, it can potentially bring revenues, taxes, create jobs, and so on. The last question I have in the social media, and I see that there are no more questions on the chat section, so I'll answer this last question, is what are the risks of running business while my immigration status is uncertain? What are the risks of running business? That's a very good question. While my immigration status is uncertain. So somebody who is here waiting for change of their status, for adjustment of status, or maybe somebody filed for asylum in the US, it's been 8 years and so on, and they don't know what's going to happen to them, or they're on TPS or parole and they don't know whether it's going to be extended, and they're thinking about opening a business. And what are the risks of owning or running business while the immigration status is uncertain? So or maybe somebody who's undocumented, right? So they want to register a business, they need to get some licenses, maybe depending on the type of business. They may apply for a business license, they have to file business taxes and so on, and they're concerned that they may be detected and they can be potentially investigated, picked up by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. don't worry, you wouldn't unless you do something significantly wrong. So you file fraudulent applications for permanent residency, you sponsor someone fraudulently, and so on, then you may come on the radar and be examined yourself, or you consistently hire undocumented workers, who are using fake work permits and so on. So if you don't do any of that, you're okay, you're good. The only concern you have is that because your immigration status is uncertain, you're concerned what will happen to my business. Now, the good news is that many businesses in the US can be sold. So there are many business brokers. In the worst case scenario, it can be sold. But as I said, also, you can explore those business investment visas, E2, L1, national interest waiver, and so on. And maybe your uncertain immigration status can become certain by switching to one of those business immigration options. So on this, I think it's good timing to end. I thank greatly everyone who joined. Thank you everyone who pressed like and who will share or shared the link to this video. And I thank everyone who will join us for the next video. I promise to come up with a new, interesting, and very relevant topic, which will be in 2 weeks from now, again on Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.